A widow with 2 daughters saves a millionaire injured on the roadside. He would change her life forever. Blood trickled down the unconscious man's forehead as Arthur Williams slammed the brakes on her 23-year-old Honda Civic. It was close to midnight on a deserted Alabama road, and any cautious person, especially a black woman driving alone with 2 sleeping daughters in the back, would have kept going. But Arthur was never the kind to leave someone helpless. The stranger was sprawled beside a wrecked black BMW, designer clothes torn and caked in mud. Even in his broken state, he carried the air of someone used to control someone who never had to ask for help. The Italian leather shoes on his feet, worth more than Arthur made in a month, stood in sharp contrast to the worn-out work shoes she wore after pulling a double shift cleaning downtown Birmingham offices. "Mom, why are we stopping?" whispered Maya. Her 12-year-old stirred awake by the Civic's coughing engine that badly needed repair. "Because someone's hurt, baby," Arthur answered, stepping out. At 35, she knew too well how fast life could turn, like the day her husband James died in a construction accident 3 years earlier, leaving her with 2 children and a mountain of medical bills. The man groaned as she approached. He looked to be in his mid-40s, temples streaked with gray. Even unconscious, there was authority in his posture, the authority of someone who never had to rely on others. Arthur's phone flashlight caught a flash of gold, a Rolex on his wrist. She bent down and checked his pulse. "Sir, can you hear me?" she asked, gently shaking his shoulder. His eyes fluttered open, hazy with confusion. When they focused on Arthur's concerned face, his expression shifted from weakness to sharp calculation. Wounded as he was, he immediately sized up his situation and the stranger beside him. Where am I?" he muttered, trying to sit before pain forced him back down. "Highway 17, about 20 miles from Birmingham," Arthur explained, steadying him. "Your car flipped. You need a hospital." The man studied her closely. Arthur knew that look. She'd seen it from corporate executives whose offices she scrubbed at night. First surprised that someone like her was offering help, then the quick, silent question, "What's this going to cost me? I'm Thomas Davidson," he said finally, as if the name alone carried weight. And maybe it did, but not for Arthur. "Arthur Williams," she replied simply. "These are my daughters, Maya and Amara. We'll get you to the hospital." Thomas opened his mouth to object, to insist he could manage on his own. But when he tried to stand, his knees buckled. There was something unsettling about watching a man so used to control suddenly rendered helpless. On the rattling ride to the hospital, Thomas Davidson, CEO of Davidson Industries, though Arthur wouldn't know that until later, remained silent. But his eyes in the rearview mirror betrayed a deeper turmoil than his head injury. He seemed to be grappling with why fate had placed him inside a battered Civic, relying on a woman he'd likely never notice in his usual world. What Thomas couldn't know was that Arthur Williams was far from ordinary. She held a business degree she'd never been allowed to use because of systemic bias. She had a strategic mind sharpened by survival and a resilience forged by loss and hardship. As the hospital lights came into view, Arthur glanced at him through the mirror. For the first time, she saw the powerful man reduced to something simple human, dependent on the kindness of a stranger. At the hospital, Thomas Davidson was treated like the elite he was. Nurses rushed. Doctors appeared instantly. The head of the department personally oversaw his case. Arthur sat quietly in the corner of the ER, Amara asleep in her lap, Maya at her side. Both girls wide-eyed at the commotion. "Just a few stitches and a mild concussion," Dr. Peterson, an older man with silver hair, reported respectfully. "But I strongly recommend you stay overnight for observation, Mr. Davidson." Thomas waved impatiently. "I don't have time to stay. Tomorrow I have a $40 million board meeting." It was only then that he really noticed Arthur again. She was still there, steady and quiet, with her daughters waiting just long enough to be sure he was safe before she would leave. The sight unsettled him. Perhaps it was her natural poise or the way her daughters carried themselves calmly despite the late hour and unfamiliar place. "Still here, are you?" he asked, as if her presence was an inconvenience. "Thanks for the ride. My assistant's coming to pick me up." Arthur nodded calmly. "I'm glad you're safe, Mr. Davidson." But Thomas wasn't finished. Something in her composed demeanor unsettled him, a lack of deference he was so accustomed to. "Here," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Let me cover your gas and trouble." He extended a $20 bill the way one might tip a valet. Arthur looked at the bill, then straight at him. That won't be necessary, sir. Anyone in my position would have done the same. Don't be proud, Thomas pressed, nudging the bill closer. I know people like you need every dollar. The air tightened. Maya frowned, sensing the disrespect, but Arthur rested a hand on her daughter's shoulder, steadying her. People like me. Arthur repeated, her tone calm. Thomas realized he'd stepped into dangerous ground, but privilege ran too deep to let him stop. I mean hardworking, simple people. Nothing to be ashamed of. Dr. Peterson cleared his throat, eager to escape the awkwardness. Arthur stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed on Thomas with a depth that made him uneasy. I work 3 jobs to raise my kids, she said evenly at last. I've been cleaning Davidson Industries offices every night for the past 2 years. The words hit Thomas like a slap. He looked at her again, trying to match this woman with the invisible figures who silently wiped down his company's halls. After hours, people he had never really seen existing, only as a replaceable part of the building's maintenance. Oh, was all he managed. 15th floor, southeast corner. Your office. Arthur continued, a faint smile on her lips. You usually stay late on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Always leave 3 half-finished coffee cups on your desk, along with contracts marked up in your signature red ink. Thomas shifted uncomfortably. She had observed his habits, knew his routines, details he never thought anyone noticed or remembered. You. Pay close attention, he muttered. I have to, Arthur replied. My job depends on being invisible yet efficient, knowing each executive's habits so I don't get in their way. She adjusted Amara, now yawning in her arms, reminding everyone how late it was. Then with quiet grace she rose to her feet. We should be going. The girls have school tomorrow. Wait, Thomas said, his voice suddenly softer. You mentioned 3 jobs. I clean offices at night, work weekends at a grocery store, and take house cleaning gigs whenever I can. Arthur explained, her tone free of complaint. James, my husband, passed and left behind medical bills. I just do what needs to be done. In that instant, Thomas saw past his own prejudice. He saw a woman working herself to the bone, raising 2 daughters alone and still stopping to help a stranger injured on the side of the road. He saw a quiet strength, a harsh mirror to his own fragility that night. Arthur, he said for the first time, using her name. Is there anything I can do for you? Some favor, you saved my life. Arthur studied him for a long moment. In her eyes was something Thomas couldn't quite place. Sharpness, intelligence, as though she were measuring him against something far beyond his understanding. Actually, she said slowly, there is something I've always wanted to ask about Davidson Industries. Thomas leaned forward, curious. I read about the Hartwell construction takeover last month. 50 million, Arthur said, her voice steady. James used to work there before he passed. I've always wondered, how are small family companies supposed to compete when corporations can just buy out any rival they find inconvenient? The question stopped Thomas cold. He hadn't expected that from a cleaning woman. The way she phrased it carried nuance, a grasp of corporate strategy far above her station. That's just business, he replied, his tone suddenly defensive. Free competition. Free competition, Arthur echoed, as if testing the weight of it. Interesting concept. At that moment, Thomas's personal assistant arrived, a nervous young man in an expensive suit. He glanced at Arthur and the girls as if they were irrelevant clutter while briskly arranging his boss's departure. Mr. Davidson, your car is waiting. Your wife is worried, he said, barely acknowledging Arthur. Of course, Thomas replied, rising from the gurney. He hesitated, then turned back toward her. Listen, if you ever need anything. We're fine, Arthur said. But in her eyes flickered something deeper, a quiet resolve that made Thomas wonder just for a second what this woman might be planning. As they left the hospital, Maya finally spoke. Mom, why did he talk to you like that? Arthur paused in the parking lot, watching the black limousine carry Thomas Davidson back to his world of wealth and privilege. Because there are people who believe money gives them the right to look down on others, sweetheart. But Mom's not lesser, Amara declared with the unshakable certainty of a child. No, I'm not. Arthur nodded, a mysterious smile flickering across her face. And maybe it's time a few people learned that lesson again. What Thomas Davidson didn't know was that for the past 2 years, Arthur Williams had been noticing much more than just work routines at Davidson Industries. Every overheard conversation, every forgotten document left on a desk, every company strategy discussed in meetings she had to clean up after Arthur had carefully filed them all away in a mind trained in management, now finally finding a use for an education no one expected her to wield. 2 weeks after the encounter at the hospital, Arthur returned to her night shift at Davidson Industries as if nothing had happened. But something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the invisible worker going through motions. She was a woman with purpose, and every office she cleaned became a potential well of information. On her very first night back, she saw Thomas working late just as she had predicted. He barely glanced up as she came in to empty the trash, treating her like part of the furniture, a kind of invisibility Arthur now realized was her greatest advantage. "Arthur, right?" he said absently, eyes glued to his laptop. "I forgot to properly thank you for helping me that night." "No thanks necessary, Mr. Davidson," she replied, continuing with her work. "Actually, there is." He opened a drawer and pulled out an envelope. $500. I know for people in your situation, that kind of money can make a difference." Arthur stopped eyeing the envelope he held out. For the second time, he was trying to pay her as if kindness were a service that could be bought. "You're very generous, Mr. Davidson, but like I said, that's not necessary." Thomas frowned, clearly displeased by her refusal. "Listen, Arthur, I know you've got pride, but don't be foolish. Take it. It's a generous offer." "Generous," Arthur echoed, as if testing the weight of the word. "What do you mean by that?" Thomas finally looked up, giving her his full attention. "Nothing, Mr. Davidson. Just observing that generous can mean very different things depending on who's saying it." Something in her tone unsettled him, though he couldn't put his finger on it. Arthur quietly finished her cleaning, but her eyes recorded everything: the documents scattered across his desk, the open files, the phone calls he made under the illusion of privacy. In the days that followed, Arthur built a careful routine. She arrived earlier, creating opportunities to overhear hallway conversations. She cleaned with meticulous attention, especially after important after-hours meetings, and she began discreetly photographing the documents Thomas and other executives left behind. It was on one of those nights that she ran into Marcus Torres, a labor attorney with a small office on the ground floor of the same building. Marcus often worked late, and Arthur noticed he always greeted her respectfully, unlike most professionals who barely acknowledged her existence. Another long night, Marcus asked one Thursday at 11 p.m., meeting her in the elevator. "Always," she replied with a tired smile. "You know, I've been noticing you for months. Always professional, always discreet. I bet you see and hear a lot of interesting things around here." Arthur studied him carefully. Marcus was in his 40s, dressed in suits clearly bought off the rack, not custom-tailored Italian cuts, and in his eyes was something that spoke of someone who had lived through his share of injustice. Sometimes, she admitted cautiously. "I mostly handle workplace discrimination cases," Marcus said casually. "I'm always impressed by what janitorial staff notice. To executives, you're practically invisible." That conversation planted a seed in Arthur's mind. Over the next few weeks, she paid particular attention to Davidson Industries meetings, especially those about layoffs, hostile takeovers, and strategies that seemed designed to harm smaller communities. One especially fruitful night, she photographed a series of emails between Thomas and the board about the planned takeover of Hartwell Construction, the very company James once worked for. The documents revealed a calculated strategy. First, Davidson deliberately sabotaged some of Hartwell's contracts, then moved to acquire the struggling company for a fraction of its true value. But it was during an executive meeting on workforce optimization that Arthur uncovered something that made her blood boil. Thomas spoke with chilling ease about firing an entire team of contracted cleaning staff, many of them black women who had served the building faithfully for years, replacing them with a cheaper automated service. "They're easily replaceable," Arthur overheard him say into the phone with his CFO. "No skills, no value creation. We'll save $300,000 a year. No skills, no value creation." The words echoed in Arthur's mind as she quietly moved around the boardroom where Thomas had spread out charts showing how the layoffs would boost quarterly profits. That night, Arthur went to Marcus Torres's office. "I need to tell you something important," she said, closing the door behind her. Marcus immediately sensed the shift in her tone. "I'm listening." "If someone had proof of illegal business practices, systemic discrimination, deliberate sabotage of companies, what could that person do?" "That depends on the evidence. Marcus replied, leaning forward with sharp interest. Are we talking hypotheticals or... Arthur opened her bag and pulled out a thick envelope filled with printed documents, photographed emails, and detailed notes of conversations she had overheard. There's nothing hypothetical about this, she said, placing it all on his desk. For the next 40 minutes, Marcus read carefully, his occasional low whistle growing louder as the scale of Arthur's evidence became clear. Arthur, he finally said, you've just compiled enough material for at least 3 separate federal cases: discrimination, corporate fraud, market manipulation, and retaliation, she asked evenly. Marcus allowed a slow smile. I prefer to call it justice. But yes, there will be serious consequences. That night, Arthur returned home carrying a sense of power she hadn't felt in years. Maya and Amara were asleep, but she sat at the kitchen table for hours, organizing the evidence, chronologically building a comprehensive case file against Davidson Industries. The next morning, Thomas Davidson woke up unaware that the unskilled worker he paid to clean his office had spent the night meticulously assembling a dossier that would destroy his reputation, his company, and his arrogance forever. He had no idea that every document he left unattended, every smug conversation he assumed was private, every ruthless decision he made with the belief he'd never face consequences, had all been carefully recorded by the woman he considered meaningless. And even as he sneered into the phone about people who know their place, something extraordinary was taking shape. Not only in Arthur's determined mind, but in the growing legal reality being built document by document, piece of evidence by piece of evidence, injustice by injustice. When Thomas hung up and went back to ignoring Arthur as she moved silently around his desk, he could not imagine he was living through the final days of his career. He was just another man of power who had underestimated the quiet strength of those he thought he controlled, never realizing he had already lost before he knew he was even playing the game. Monday morning, Thomas Davidson began his day as usual. He arrived at the office at 7 a.m., intending to review final documents for the mass layoffs ahead of the 9 o'clock board meeting. The $300,000 in projected annual savings would secure his Q4 profit margins exactly as planned. Arthur was there too, finishing her morning cleaning with her familiar quiet efficiency. Thomas barely noticed her as he checked his emails, entirely unaware that every move he made was being quietly observed and recorded. Good morning, Mr. Davidson, Arthur said politely, as she emptied the trash beside his desk. He murmured, eyes still fixed on his screen. At 8:30, Thomas's assistant rushed in. Sir, there are reporters in the lobby, a lot of them, and the FBI is on their way up. Thomas frowned, bewildered. The FBI? What are you talking about? Before he could get an answer, 3 federal agents entered the office, followed by Marcus Torres and 2 others. Thomas didn't immediately recognize. Thomas Davidson, the lead agent, announced, handing him an official packet, you are being summoned before a federal grand jury. Preliminary charges include corporate fraud, market manipulation, systemic workplace discrimination, and money laundering. Thomas's world seemed to freeze. This is absurd. I don't know what any of you are talking about. Marcus stepped forward, his expression calm and professional. Mr. Davidson, I represent many of the victims of your unlawful business practices. I'd like to present some evidence that might help clarify the situation. At that moment, Thomas finally noticed Arthur still standing in the corner of the room, but something in her presence had completely changed. She was no longer bent over a mop. She stood tall, steady, her eyes sharp, with an intelligence and authority he had never once seen in her before. Arthur Thomas called, genuinely unsettled. Actually, Marcus cut in, let me introduce her properly. This is Arthur Williams, bachelor's in business administration from the University of Alabama. Her MBA program was cut short after the death of her husband. And now she's a primary witness with direct access to your daily operations. Marcus opened a thick file and placed it on Thomas's desk. For the past 6 months, Mrs. Williams has meticulously documented every one of your illegal actions, recorded conversations, photographs of confidential documents, printed emails, detailed meeting notes. Thomas turned to Arthur, his face a mixture of shock and panic. You've been spying on me. I've just been doing my job, Arthur replied calmly. Cleaning up. Turns out I've also been cleaning the moral trash you scatter everywhere. Marcus pressed on, unrelenting. Here we have evidence of you deliberately sabotaging Hartwell Construction, the company where Mrs. Williams's late husband once worked. Documents show you rigged contracts to drive them into bankruptcy, then bought the company for pennies on the dollar. Thomas felt the blood drain from his face. That that was just a legal business strategy. And here Marcus said, opening his laptop and pressing play, "We have you describing your janitorial staff as disposable, unskilled, and worthless." From the speakers, Thomas's own voice filled the room. "They're easily replaceable. Unskilled, no value. We'll save $300,000 a year." Silence blanketed the room. Thomas glanced around and for the first time realized he was completely surrounded legally, morally, and publicly. "As for the city inspector you bribed," Marcus added, "we've got all the evidence in the emails you left open on your desk during night cleanings, not to mention your Cayman accounts for tax evasion." Arthur finally spoke again, her tone steady, almost gentle. "Mr. Davidson, for 2 years. I've cleaned this office every night. I watched you celebrate firing employees, mock the families you ruined, and scheme to defraud small businesses. I used to think you were just cruel. Now I know you're a criminal." Thomas turned to her desperation, cracking his voice. "Arthur, let me explain. I can make this right for you, whatever misunderstandings there were." "Make it right," Arthur repeated, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "Like the $500 you slipped me at the hospital, or the $20 you threw at me after I saved your life on the highway?" Marcus stepped in. "Mr. Davidson, we've just been contacted by the Atlanta Constitution and Channel 7 News. It seems your story has already gone very public." At that moment, Thomas's assistant burst back into the room, pale as a sheet. "Sir, the board has called an emergency meeting, and your wife is on the line. She says she's watching you on live television." Thomas rushed to the window. The parking lot below was jammed with news vans, reporters holding microphones, and a swelling crowd of onlookers. His entire life was collapsing, broadcast in real time to the entire city. How he whispered, turning back to Arthur. "How could a common janitor possibly—" "A common janitor," Arthur interrupted for the first time, letting a flicker of irritation show. "Mr. Davidson, the invisible see everything. The overlooked notice everything. And the people you call worthless are the ones who record everything." A federal agent stepped forward. "Mr. Davidson, you'll need to come with us for questioning. Your lawyer can meet you at federal headquarters." As they escorted him out of his own office, Thomas stopped at the door and turned back for one last look at Arthur. She was calmly arranging her cleaning supplies as if this were just another ordinary day. "Why?" he asked, his voice hollow with despair. "Why did you do this to me?" Arthur paused, meeting his eyes squarely. "Because James Williams wasn't just a name on a layoff notice. He was my husband, the father of my children, a good man who died working for a company you deliberately destroyed." Her words hit Thomas like a freight train. All this time he hadn't been watched by some faceless cleaner. He had been under the steady gaze of the widow of the man whose life he had ruined, a man whose name he hadn't even bothered to remember. "And the money," he stammered, voice trembling. "The payments I gave you?" "The scraps you offered," Arthur replied coldly. "You tried to buy my dignity with $20. In the end, you lost $300 million. Looks like a bad deal even for a man with your so-called management expertise." The door closed behind Thomas Davidson. Arthur Williams calmly returned to her work. After all, there was still plenty left to clean. And now, for the first time in years, she was cleaning up something that truly mattered. 6 months later, Davidson Industries officially shut down. Thomas Davidson was serving a 16-year sentence for corporate fraud, systemic discrimination, and tax evasion. His mansion had been auctioned off to compensate the victims of his crimes. Arthur Williams now sat in her new office on the 20th floor of the very same building where she once scrubbed restrooms. Her corporate compliance consulting firm was rapidly growing, serving companies eager to avoid repeating Davidson's fatal mistakes. "Mom, you've got 3 more interview requests," Maya, now 13, announced as she sorted through her mother's mail with remarkable efficiency. Marcus Torres stepped in, holding a stack of contracts. "IBM wants to hire your services. Looks like your reputation for ethical cleanup is spreading nationwide." Arthur smiled, glancing down through the glass window at the streets below. People moved in every direction, each carrying their own struggles, dreams, and dignity, all of which deserved respect. That morning, she received a letter from prison. Thomas Davidson had finally sent a genuine apology. It was far too late to save his company or his freedom, but it was never too late to acknowledge the humanity he had once trampled. The greatest revenge was not destroying Thomas Davidson. It was building something far greater than he had ever dared to imagine. Arthur had proven that those who are overlooked are never truly invisible. They watch, and when they choose to act, they rewrite the entire rulebook. If this story of how intellect and patience defeated arrogance and prejudice has inspired you, subscribe to the channel to discover more true stories that prove justice always finds its way, even when we least expect it.